This is Unit 4.7, Solar Radiation and the Earth's Seasons. So here's a fun graphic. If you're not sure where to live, but you want to determine it based on your temperature preferences, then you should consider whether you like it hot or cold, or both, or neither. So places you should live if you love cold and you love heat, right? Consider Kansas City or Beijing, right? That have some very serious temperature extremes. If you hate the cold and you hate the heat, then maybe San Francisco is for you, or Bogota. Um, Places that experience very consistent temperature all year. If you love the heat and you hate the cold, maybe Miami, Karachi, Dubai. It's very hot all the time there. Places, if you love the cold and you really don't like the heat, right? Duluth, very cold most of the time. St. Petersburg, Moscow, even McMurdo Station, right? That's in the Antarctica. So we're going to look at temperature and how some of the Earth seasons are affected, how the Earth seasons are affected by the tilt of the Earth. So one thing that's important to know is that the Earth seasons aren't affected by the Earth's location to the sun. So the Earth is in what we're calling the Goldilocks zone. So if you're too close to the sun, like Venus or Mercury, it's too hot. If you're too far away, like Mars or Jupiter, it's going to be too cold. But if you're kind of where the Earth is, plus or minus, a few thousand kilometers, you're in a habitable zone, and most of the places on Earth are habitable. Generally, this corresponds to the distance where liquid water could exist on the Earth's surface. If you're kind of into astronomy, then the habitable zone changes based on how large the star is. The sun is a pretty average star, and so we have a pretty average habitable zone. But if the star were much larger or much smaller, this would affect the location of the habitable zone. So the Earth moves in a lot of different ways, and all these different ways can affect the amount of solar energy at the surface of the Earth, right? It doesn't have to do with how far the Earth is from the sun. It really has to do with how the Earth moves relative to the sun. So, of course, the Earth rotates, once every 24 hours. It revolves around the sun once per year. The Earth's axis is tilted relative to the sun. And then there's also atmospheric conditions, which are somewhat independent of the Earth's movement relative to the sun. So how many of these ways does the Earth move? Really three of those ways, right? It rotates, it revolves, and it has the tilt, which changes the position of parts of the Earth relative to the sun. So what causes the seasons? So here in Maryland, we're in the northern hemisphere. It's summer. When the northern hemisphere is tilted toward the Earth, is tilted toward the sun. We're not actually closer to the sun. It's the angle that makes the difference, and also the amount of time that we're being exposed to the sun. Right. So the sun rises higher in the sky. It stays above the horizon longer. Right. It rises earlier and it sets later. But most importantly, in the summer, the sun's rays strike the ground most directly at the largest angle. Um, and so the summer is not because the Earth is closer to the sun in the summer. It's really just because the rays are striking the ground more directly. You can kind of see this in this diagram. So on the left is the December solstice, right? That's winter for us. And you'll notice that where we are in the high 30-degree latitudes, like the sun's rays are hitting the Earth like somewhat obliquely, where in the southern hemisphere, they're hitting more directly. And then in the June solstice, which is summer for us, the sunlight is hitting us more directly and hitting the southern hemisphere more obliquely. So the seasons are caused by the angle that the light makes towards the ground and the Earth, and not due to the Earth's location to the sun. Fun video to watch is Bill and I explaining the seasons, so we'll get to that at some point. So important definition, of course, is weather versus climate, which is affected by the seasons. So weather is really short-term atmospheric conditions, usually over hours or days for a particular area. So short-term atmospheric conditions, the weather can include temperature, pressure, moisture content can change over a short period of time. Of course, precipitation, sunshine, cloud cover, and wind direction and speed changes over short periods. This is different from climate. Climate is a general pattern of atmospheric or weather conditions measured over long periods of time, usually over decades or thousands of years. So while we may have a temperate climate here, that means that doesn't prevent us from having weather that's on the extreme, very cold or very hot weather, even though on average it might be somewhere in the middle. Fun quote from Mark Twain: climate is what we expect, right, over time, but weather is what we actually get. Right, well, that is Unit 4.7, Solar Radiation and the Seasons. Please let me know what questions you have.